Chapter 9, Conscious Living. When man realizes that he himself creates his personal and universal environment in concrete terms, then he can begin to create a private and universal environment much superior to the present one. That is a result of haphazard and unenlightened constructions. This is our main message to the world, and this is the next line in man's conceptual development. Seth, The Unknown Reality, Volume 2, Epilogue. Conscious Living. Every organism, including the amoeba, has the ability to create its life by translating ideas into idea constructions. That simple organism takes every idea it receives and, without thought or reflection, instantaneously constructs what it needs to survive on the physical plane. It doesn't know itself as a separate entity apart from its environment. It senses its environment and understands it is one with it. Much more complicated organisms, such as animals, similarly know they are one with their surroundings, and yet they sense their individuality too. They receive many more ideas than the simpler organisms and handle them differently. For instance, in order to create their existence, they reflect briefly on ideas to determine which to manifest, and the result is the first tracings of choice and decision found in consciousness. The result is also the first suggestion of time awareness found in consciousness, for to reflect means to pause. Then, up the scale of complicated organisms, stands mankind, and I use the term generically. Man is so receptive to ideas that he is barraged by them constantly. As his consciousness expanded, more and more ideas followed. He realized he could not possibly construct all of them into physical reality. What was needed was a screen through which to make decisions and choices, and so conscious purpose resulted. Then memory was conceptualized and developed so that idea constructions could be thought of as separate from each other, providing man with a basis for comparison and selection. This compartmentalizing of idea constructions blossomed into a belief in linear time because memory seemed to suggest past experience, and so time continuity became an assumption by developing man. This naturally led to the birth of ego consciousness as man started to see his identity as separate from his idea constructions, since he remained in the moment and they came and went. Ego consciousness freed him to make selections for materialization into his reality based on desire and focus. A problem occurred as man began to divorce himself more and more from the world of his constructions, eventually seeing them as something apart from his creation. Even though this was an artificial division, it nonetheless started to alienate him from nature, and the search for a mythic figurehead which could be assigned the role of creator ensued. Gods and goddesses were placed throughout time by man to symbolize the inner reflection of his origins. While at times these symbols helped assuage the loneliness that grew from not remembering his oneness with all things, man still knew in his soul that something was amiss. Some of the race, more alienated than others perhaps, turned from theology to mythology to mechanistic answers, and so aligned themselves with modern science, which verified their belief in complete removal from their source and nature. The good news is that man can never divorce himself from himself. The bad news is that he can create the illusion of separation through his beliefs. What results, however, is a globe full of haphazard constructions created by the likes of hatred, bigotry, depression, anger, cynicism, and fear, and fueled by beliefs in luck, fate, and circumstances beyond control. Our race is at an extremely important point in its psychic evolution. It has taken its beliefs in separations from its source just about as far as it can without creating its own destruction, at least in this shared mass reality we found ourselves in today. We will continue to do untold damage to civilization and nature until we stop seeing our idea constructions as separate from ourselves and ourselves as separate from the source of our world. The solution to changing the world now experienced by man is for man to recreate it in a new mold. That recreation, without question, demands that we once again acknowledge the inner reality from which the outer reality springs. Until we know intellectually and intuitively that creation happens first in the inner world and then appears in the outer world, and that we, in conjunction with our inner selves, are the powerhouses behind that creation, no sustained changes will occur on a global scale. They can't. It's that simple. Global events are formed just as individual ones are, but they are formed by the mass beliefs of all souls alive in physical reality. The great dramas that have crossed the centuries, such as the Holocaust, the Renaissance, the birth of America, and apartheid in South Africa, could not have occurred unless a lot of individual thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs had coalesced into mass events. To alter beliefs on a mass reality level takes many people imbued with the same understandings. It takes the magnification of one individual's reality combined with many others to launch mass reactions. Periods of great art and technology were started in this way, as were new cultural periods and the births of religions. So were acts of genocide, the sweep of deadly epidemics, and war's mass murders. We get what we believe is possible and probable individually and en masse. The answer to world change becomes private change. As each of us sheds our beliefs in vulnerability, victimization, and the need for aggression, and replaces them with beliefs in complete security and inner strength, our world lights up with hope. Because it's one less person feeding negativity into the world's psychic gestalt of consciousness, and it's one more person feeding the same gestalt with love and peace. As Seth reminds us, the race suffers when any of its members die of starvation or disease, even as a whole plant suffers if a group of its leaves are unhappy. In the same way, all members of the species are benefited by the happiness, health, and fulfillment of any of those individuals who compose it. One part of the species cannot grow or develop at the expense of the other portions for very long. The doorway to knowledge. Each evolutionary change is preceded and caused by a new idea. Perhaps the most important idea we need to accept in order to launch a massive shift in world conditions is that we are multi-dimensional entities, active in both time and non-time simultaneously. When we remember that we straddle realities, that we use the outer to learn the manipulation of energy into concrete objects and events that are decided upon and formed first in the inner, then we stop identifying so completely with the ego, and new flexibility is brought to our minds. Individually, we can only go so far through the more common intellectual and creative channels, and then must open to other stimuli. When we cease to rely upon answers that have been given to us by others, we automatically open new channels of information always available if we but know it. The inner senses are methods of perception that lead to those inner pathways of knowledge. They put us in immediate touch with our inner self, and from it comes great assistance and wisdom. If this conscious awareness of our inner self doesn't convince us of our multidimensionality, nothing will. To experience great leaps in intuitive understanding takes the ability to look inward, to concentrate to the point of softening the edges of the physically oriented self, and an intense desire to learn. combined with the confidence that knowledge can be directly received from the inner self, conditions are brought about for the passage of information through the inner senses. This doorway to knowledge is always open, but we must desire it. Those who are certain of the answers won't ask, and so the door remains closed to them. Those who refuse to change their beliefs don't even notice a door. We must use the conscious mind with clarity and come to rely on its assessment of our exterior world. This means the conscious mind, buoyed by undistorted knowledge, must be used as completely as possible, with its snapshot of the outer world uncolored by raging emotions. The point of being consciousness in a physical reality is to see our idea constructions made manifest and decide what does and does not work for us, or what we do or not do, or what we do or do not wish to experience. In other words, the point of being physical is to come to a conscious understanding of how our thoughts literally take on form. Seth says we must learn this lesson well, because we need to fully understand the implications of creation before we can move on to other lessons in other realities. The conscious mind is a most valuable tool and should not be treated as the unrepentant stepchild of our uplifted spiritual natures. There is no division between intuitional and intellectual knowledge. It is only our misinterpretation of outer reality that has caused us to believe self-consciousness or the ego is a thing to be dominated and controlled. It is true that when the ego becomes rigid, it very effectively locks us into thought systems that take us nowhere we want to go. It's not the ego needs taming. All it needs is new understandings through which to filter exterior experiences. The ego must become consciously aware of far more of the reality in which it finds itself. To do so, it eventually must shed the ideas of oneself, one body, one world, one God, one timeline. It must become aware of probable pasts and probable futures and learn to consciously select its direction. Conscious living. If time is simultaneous and we're surrounded by every probability that can ever occur, that suggests there are also unlimited worlds we can inhabit through our unlimited selection of probabilities. There's one where no hunger exists, because we understand our intense power to create whatever we need. And there's one where the race dies from the face of the earth because there is no food to be had. There's a world where peace reigns, and the word war has no meaning. And there is one where war reigns, and the word peace is vaguely remembered from antiquity. Thank goodness, the means of reaching our destination of choice, the civilization we wish to experience, is part of our racial makeup. We have inner codes embedded in our psyches that are patterns or models depicting man's greatest potential and possible achievements. The inner codes are what draw us into the future, because as consciousness we seek to actualize them, growing into ourselves in the process. We unfold as we strive to become living embodiments of our potential inherent in the inner codes. We seek the blueprint for our growth as flowers seek sun. Unless we become rigid in our thinking and inflexible in our belief systems, we can be guided and prodded into a new world. The choice is ours, the prize is ours. Becoming conscious creators, and all it implies is the path. And this is the last part of Linda's wonderful book, 10,000 Whispers. I hope you enjoyed it, and I see you in the next.